What are your thoughts on circumcision? I doubt anyone sees this or cares. It's just my story. Take it or leave it. Maybe it'll help you decide what's best for you and your children. I was circumcised but didn't know that they fucked it up until the first time I had sex. Being a virgin to 25, obviously, I was super excited, but my girl's face was definitely a WTF moment, like when the Spider-Man sense goes off like something's wrong. She still had sex with me, but it just was so gross feeling. Only had sex once or twice since then. Guess I kicked or moved or something and the tip is cut at an angle in one part, like an awkward sharpened pencil. It gets worse. I ended up learning years later my parents got a settlement from the hospital for it. Yeah. That money was long gone. There was a case where the person who was assigned to snip the foreskin managed to fuck up badly and they accidentally cut the kid's penis off. The kid was 4 years old. https://www.google.com/app/s/www.independent.co.uk/news/world/europe/Dr. Cutboy Penis Circumcision Geneva Switzerland Procedure Muslim A7658361.html% 3fab. In another case they cut off the tip of the penis. So you are not alone. It's still fucked up how you and the other people got unlucky for procedure that was not necessary. I'm American and have a son that is uncircumcised. His doctor asked why we didn't have him circumcised and how it would be much cleaner if he was, and that was her only reason he should be circumcised. Like, what? Does she think the majority of non-American men are just out there with dirty dicks? I asked her for other reasons and was met with more mumbling about proper cleaning. I'm sad it became a fad here. No reason other than another procedure for the doctors to be paid for as far as I can tell. My husband is circumcised and his mother was flabbergasted when she heard we decided not to with our son. I asked her why she decided to do that with her sons and she said that's just what is done. I don't understand. I was 19 when I had my son and just thought it's what you do. Since the day it was done I've told every parent not to do it. My poor innocent baby screamed like I never heard him scream before or since, and they wouldn't even let me be in the room. I felt so anxious when they took him to another room, but I didn't know why and didn't know how to interpret it until I heard him. I was hysterically crying when they brought him to me and he was so miserable I would never ever have it done again to another baby. It's really barbaric and I cannot fathom why I considered cutting off a piece of my son's anatomy that he was born with normal. My son had to be in the NICU for a week after he was born. One time I was in there and overheard a baby getting circumcised. I have never heard a baby that young make that kid cry. I sobbed for that baby. And then the nurses wheeled him out and laughed, because he cried himself silent. Haha, he's in shock LOL. He looked like he was strapped to a crucifix with tears streaming down his newborn face. My God, I didn't want to cut my son, but the nurses basically asked us every day before we left and only one muttered good under her breath. I would never ever put my son through that kind of pain for no real reason, and I will never forget that baby's cries. This precisely. I am very against it. I see it as unnecessary mutilation. My partner has made pro-cutting statements, for a number of personal reasons involving what sound like some sort of malpractice on his doctor's part. We currently don't have kids, so it hasn't come up in any serious fashion, but if we ever have a son I will be aggressively anti-circumcision and I will fight anyone and everyone about their unwelcome opinion on my baby's dick. Honestly, if I ever spawn I'm just going to hope for a girl and then sidestep the whole problem. Kinda how it is for me, too. Aside from the part about sons, gay, no plans to adopt or anything. I don't personally feel like I've been horribly victimized and I'm missing a ton of pleasure in my life because I was circumcised as a baby, though I recognize that not everyone has the same experience of it and I know some guys' circumcision is a lot tighter than others, whereas I still have a fair amount of movable skin. I wouldn't have chosen it myself, but I don't think it's really that big a deal for me personally. I never really thought about it until probably my mid-20s, beyond it being a largely cosmetic difference between myself and some other men. That said, I think it's a fundamentally personal decision and should not be done to infants, children, for anything other than a medical reason that's not responded to non-surgical treatments. I have a relatively unique view since I was circumcised before my 30th for medical reasons, specifically lichen sclerosis/BXO. The recovery time sucks. Try telling all your coworkers you'll be taking a week of sick leave, then find a way to not leave them worried you're dying without telling them about your junk. Plus, in my case, it was closer to 2 weeks before I could exist normally again. But even so, I'm glad I was not circumcised at birth, and I would still chose to do it this way again. Now that said, I never experienced the whole one-cut thing that so many here have, though I overheard it a few times, so maybe I would have felt a little differently if so. I think you're making the right choice. The chances of having any sort of complications that require circumcision later in life are very, very rare. I have 2 younger brothers, both are circumcised. I remember being at the hospital when my youngest brother was born, watching them take him out of the room a few hours after being born to be circumcised. My stepdad went with him, and he said he ended up crying because they don't put the baby under anesthetic, so the wails he was making was almost unbearable to hear. On the other hand, my boyfriend and his 2 brothers are uncircumcised, have never had any issues or resent their parents for it. We both agree when we have children, if we ever have a son, we'll be leaving him the way he was born. If he wants to have a surgical procedure done to his body when he's older, he can make that decision on his own. Was done to me as a baby, and I'm only just learning today that it's not a good thing. Literally, in health class we watched a video where they listed all the pros of circumcision, and I just never really questioned it. I did think it was weird that my parents had it done for religious reasons, even though it's not part of their religion. My dad talks about how he had to leave the hospital or he was going to punch the doctor because of my screams, but he writes it off as the doctor didn't know what he was doing and paints himself as the hero instead of realizing maybe that's just how it is. Just adding to my religious trauma and daddy issues, I guess. It is unarguably genital mutilation. In South Africa, it's illegal for circumcision to be performed on children other than for medical and religious reasons, the latter being quite narrowly defined, until the age of 16. When the child's consent is required, there are cultural male circumcision practices that become relevant at around this age. However, it is still often done shortly after birth. Many parents and doctors are either oblivious to these provisions in the Children's Act, or simply disregard them. I hope it dies out and is regarded as a sad chapter of history. Nearly all mammals have foreskins. The majority of the world is intact because it's a functioning body part that doesn't need fixed. There's a lot of misinformation, like that it's cleaner, just like all other mammals. Take a bath, you filthy animal. There is also a lot of incorrect intact care in America, because the damage is still being undone. A lot of people forcefully retract infants, young boys. It's not well known that the only person who should retract an intact boy's foreskin is the owner of it. There are a lot of doctors that are completely uneducated about the subject. Forceful retraction is the cause of much pain and discomfort. I personally believe it's why you often hear of stories where men had to get it done later because their care was incorrect. A good example of how goofy circumcision is. It's a debate on whether or not men should keep their foreskins because it's inconvenient in healthcare settings in America as they get older, as opposed to increasing education, care, and bathing. Obviously, the rest of the world is getting on just fine providing intact care to old men. When I had my son, no blood, no gauze, no Vaseline, no healing oil, no pain. And I didn't spend $300 plus. His body took care of itself. I felt very blessed that the hospital I gave birth in told me circumcision wasn't necessary after I said I was keeping him intact. I've seen so many circumcised men with the head of their penis super dry. It's caused by rubbing up against their clothes all the time because normally the foreskin would protect that part of the body and keep it lubricated. I've seen circumcised men get sores because of the friction from their hands and not using enough lubricant. If that part of their body hadn't been taken, they'd have gliding action. I've seen too many men who struggle with pain during sex. Erections. Men deserve the same protection and equality against genital circumcision. Boys are already born perfect. This is the only thing, so far, I regret about how I've raised my son. In high school I was obsessed with Alice Walker and some of her writing involves genitalia mutilation, which sparked a lot of curiosity in me and research on it for both males and females. I knew at like 16-17 years old that I didn't want to circumcise if I ever had a son. Years later, however, when my son was born I was pressured by his pediatrician, the doctor who performed the delivery, and even my husband to have the kid circumcised. Of course, when you've got all this pressure to do it, and funky baby hormones running rampant, it's hard to navigate what you're told versus what you think. Basically, the overseeing doctor told me it was the same as neglect not to do the procedure and I caved. It was awful, not just in that this tiny baby needs extra care and attention for a wound just days after being born, but it was also hard on me. I said I wouldn't do that to him and I let myself be bullied into making a decision that I disagree with. If I could go back and change it, I would. Is no one in this thread going to bring up the totally bananas history of circumcision in the US? Because it is wild. Circumcision went from being just a minor religious practice to being proposed as a cure for all sorts of unrelated things. It was kind of the more painful essentials of its day. Neurological problems, circumcision. Psychological problems, circumcision. Orthopedic problems, circumcision. Seriously, you want to go research the history of this shit. Things that really put it over the top for popularity across mainstream US though, was when it started being promoted as cleaner. When it became a way to distinguish white upper classes from all the dirty immigrants, also basically a status symbol that you were wealthy enough to afford a doctor to attend the birth and or perform the surgery. Next time you're eating some cereal, you should also thank dear Mr. Kellogg for doing so much to promote circumcision as a strategy to stop boys from masturbating by making it less pleasant. Obviously I'm against doing cosmetic surgery on the genitals of infants, but the history of circumcision feels like it's got to be some sort of joke. It's not common in Europe unless for religious reasons. I view it as a form of child mutilation. My husband was circumcised at 10 for medical reasons and in the 20 years I have known him he has barely spoken about it. He said it was very painful and shocking. He also said if they changed the law to prevent babies being circumcised and you could only get it done when you were old enough to remember how traumatic it is in a generation, there would be no circumcisions anymore. I read it only became popular in the USA as after the WIA they had high numbers of pediatric DRS and it was something extra they could charge for. It was not done for medical or health reasons but financial. I'm not circumcised. Grew up hearing peers make fun of uncut dicks and became really self-conscious and insecure about it for a while. Eventually grew out of that when enough partners told me I was dripping over nothing. Now, I definitely consider it genital mutilation and am so grateful to have my whole self down there, with all the nerves to feel all the feelings. A few years back a coworker asked me my opinion on the topic, as she was debating whether or not to circumcise her son. Her rationale for doing it was, I want him to look like his father. I thought that was so weird. At no point in my life ever did I think to myself, I'm so glad my dad and I have similar looking dicks. Unless out of medical necessity or you are a consenting adult who wants this done, there's no need for it. Why would anyone mutilate their son's genitals when we don't do the same to the girls? It's illegal to mutilate a girl's genitals from my understanding in the US, and they're too young to give consent or understand what's going on at all outside of why does it hurt so much down there. When I was harassed by my in-laws when my son was born when we didn't get him circumcised, saying we have to do it and you don't want him to look different from dad or grandpa, I told them, We don't believe in mutilating an infant's genitals simply because you think we have to. Good to know you have no problems with cutting off part of a baby's penis and some weird creepy shit with making sure he knows his penis looks just like his dad's and grandpa's, like they're going to compare like they do in locker room of a school. Besides, hospitals make a fortune off of selling the foreskin to beauty companies to make anti-aging cream, even though it's been proven to either not do anything or make you age even faster. It's an unnecessary procedure that has seemingly by largely religious convention become not only accepted but in some parts of the world expected, and people even try to justify it with these weird excuses. It's easier to clean, sure I guess, but, it's not exactly difficult to begin with, either. No uncircumcised guy in the shower goes, boy, I sure wish this didn't take a few extra seconds to clean, and saving those extra few seconds is totally worth cutting part of my dick off. And it's easier to clean hardly seems to be a reason to start chopping off parts of our anatomy anyway. It prevents medical complications. Technically it prevents medical complications of the foreskin, like thermosis is impossible, though that same argument would support removing babies' appendices at birth, since it prevents medical complications since they will never have appendicitis. It reduces the risk of STDs. The only one established for that is for HIV, in heterosexual men of African descent. Thing is though, in North America the number of women with HIV is quite low, and the number of women who have HIV and don't know it is even lower. Not knowing is important because if they know, chances are a condom will be used, which makes the circumcision benefit moot. Congratulations, you reduce your chance of HIV if you bareback a woman who has it, but basic safe sex and using a condom when fucking rondos is more effective altogether. The big thing for me is that I see a lot of men who are trying to reform a foreskin. Outside of medical considerations, you very rarely see men getting circumcised when they can give informed consent. I was born with hypospatia. Because circumcision is an established practice, it wasn't considered weird to use my foreskin as a grout to correct my wang as a baby. I always knew my junk had a little extra battle damage in the form of stitch scars, but it wasn't until I thought to Google untreated hypospatia in my 20s, that I realized just how different my life would have been without the luxury of extra dong meat to work with. It freaked me the hell out. I was spared a life of having a penis so deformed it would have affected my ability to reproduce. Now I'm married with a kid, and my wife couldn't care less about my amazing dong. Our boy has his foreskin, because WHO knows what he might need it for later in life. Weird. I'll preface this with, I fully support bans on infant circumcision. If it ever comes up for a vote, I'll vote in favor. It's weird for me though, because I'm Jewish, and supporting a ban on part of my own religion feels off. Also, anti-circumcision activists are universally shitheads. I have literally never met one who isn't straight up hateful to people who aren't ideologically pure. I've been attacked for having weird feelings about it even though I support their cause. I've seen them go absolutely nuts hating on a guy who supported them, but wasn't upset about his own circumcision. Not to mention they love to derail conversations about FGM with their cause. They suck. I'm not an asshole, so I support the cause still, but I can't stand them. Basically, I support banning it, but I won't associate with people who are passionate about that. Not strictly fair to them, but that's what they get for demanding complete purity of thought. Same, and for about the exact same reasons. I like it the way it is. My GF and every woman I've ever asked about it prefers it cut, albeit it is only 3 women, so that may obviously differ. And I'm glad it got done when I was a kid. I honestly don't get the explanation I've seen multiple times now that it started hundreds of years ago to stop men from feeling more pleasure when masturbating. Like, how would the people that still thought bloodletting was a legit medical practice know that? I know I'm probably wrong, but to me pleasure is something that's pretty hard to quantify, as more or less pleasure would differ from person to person, and it's ultimately up to their experience to judge what is more, less pleasurable based on prior experiences. Ultimately, I think we shouldn't be subjecting babies to a procedure until they're old enough to understand and consent, but I also feel as if this issue as a whole is a little bit of a thing that's being blown out of proportion and we have bigger things to worry about. It's just my personal opinion and I'm not pushing it on anyone else, so obviously Reddit will crucify me for sharing it. I have a very unique experience concerning this, but for me the bottom line is that it's not right. I was circumcised when I was 11. I'm told that my parents wanted to wait for me to decide. That didn't work out. The summer before junior high, my parents kept talking about me not looking like the other boys in the locker room, which was never an issue because we didn't shower. But my mom especially was concerned. I didn't really understand what they were talking about. They had doubt, and when the doctor told them to just do it, they did. Here's how it went down. A few weeks later, in July or August, I had a checkup to get shots before school and my doctor said that I had phimosis. Phimosis is basically an overly tight foreskin. It's the only medically sound reason for the surgery. Now I don't doubt my doctor, but he had basically scolded my parents every checkup that I had. I know for a fact that he had vocal religious views on it and I think that it influenced his thoughts. Now I'm all for talk. And even scold my parents and proselytize all you want. But don't cut the skin off my 11-year-old dick because of your beliefs. I mean, I never even got to use the thing. But suddenly when I start growing, everyone is super concerned about it. So the thing is, there are many other treatments for phimosis. Jumping to surgery is a very aggressive decision for a problem that I had for a decade and never had any trouble with.